Hello, hello, awesome humans. All right, I always say I'm so excited about this episode because I am. Otherwise, I would not be doing this podcast if I was bored. But I'm particularly excited because we're going to talk about a topic that we have not talked about on the podcast yet. We're going to talk about personal branding for introverts. And if your brain just went like, oh, me, introvert, or like personal branding, what, why? We're going to get into all of that. But I want to tell you that my particular excitement, in addition to the fact that we have a really special guest that I'm going to introduce in a moment, but my particular excitement is that I am someone who's been an introvert my whole life, but was pretending to be an extrovert. And it's something that I'm so excited to explore. And I've met so many people who have said the same thing. So I think I'm excited for all of you extroverts and introverts listening to this. Whether personal branding is something you've thought about or not, I think it's going to be really interesting for you. And I have a really special guest with me, Goldie Chan. She is a fellow creative. She's a keynote speaker. She's an author and a cancer survivor. Goldie was named, I love this, the Oprah of LinkedIn by Huffington Post. I really dig that. I really, really dig that. But most importantly, she has her first book coming out at the end of October. It is called Personal Branding for Introverts. And I am so excited to talk to her about the book and her experience. Goldie, welcome to Reinventibility.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk not only about how personal branding is relevant, more relevant than ever these days, but also about introversion. I feel like all of the really respectable tomes on introversion at this point, they're a decade old or they're at least 5 years old. And I hope that this is a fresh take on what it's like to be an introvert in the workplace.
Okay, let's just dive right into that.
Yeah.
Um, I just shared before, but I just want to share it slower and not talk over myself. I'm almost 50 years old. And for most of my life, for about 40 years, I walked around being like, yeah, I'm an extrovert. I love people. I always love to be out. I kind of had this, and I had this energy about me.
Yeah.
And then when I was 40, I suffered a really debilitating burnout. It was actually, I've written books about this, so we don't need to get into it. It was actually more than that. I think it was like a breakdown of being. And the reason was not because I was working too much. I was running startups, but that has nothing to do with it. I was so disconnected from myself. And one of the things that I discovered as I started to get to know myself for the first time after I burnt out was I really love to be alone. And not only do I love to be alone, when I don't have alone time, I'm kind of a psychotic, unpleasant human being who is like driving my family crazy and driving people around me crazy. And it took a lot of like self honesty to say, hey, uh, an introvert is not someone who hates people, because I really think that's what I thought. I know it sounds really ignorant, but I think a lot of people think that. That's what I thought. Introverts don't like people. I was like, wait, I do like people.
Mhm.
But I was like, I need a tremendous amount of alone and quiet time. And
Yeah.
I love people, but I get really drained. So that's my experience in just learning. And just to say, my life changed when I got honest with myself and started to restructure my life to align with who I was. And so I want to talk to you about, where do all these misconceptions come from? What does it actually mean to be an introvert and extrovert? And I read in your book, I'm going to get this right, I wrote it down, that introverts make up 25 to 40% of the population, but many of them feel pressure to pretend they're extroverts. Hi, I'm Natalie, and I used to pretend that I was an extrovert. So I'd love for you to talk about, maybe we can start with like, why is that? Why do we have these strange misconceptions? And what does it actually mean to be an introvert or an extrovert?
So, like I said, I think that there is so much. It's so funny because there's so many subjects out there that there's no information about, right? But I think introversion is something that there's a lot of information about. There's meme pages, some of which I follow because they're very funny. There's definitions, there's books, etc. And I think so many of those books are focused around introverts being quiet, introverts being socially awkward, introverts being all of the negative sides of introverts, like hiding by themselves forever. And that's how you know they're an introvert, because they never go outside ever. And that, of course, is not going to be true in this day and age, because can't sustain a career or life or social network without going outside and engaging with other people. And so I think that there's so many different kinds of introverts now. And
Mm.
Natalie, of course, you are one of those kinds of introverts. So I'm a different kind. I'm an introvert with social anxiety.
Uh-huh.
So if you put me on stage in front of thousands of people, zero social anxiety. I'm fine. I'm just talking to a crowd. But if you put me in a very cool party in Los Angeles with 10 very cool people that I don't know, I get extreme social
Mm.
anxiety. And I think, and in my head, what is going on is, what is my role here? How am I supposed to act? Am I being cool? Oh gosh, I'm not being cool. Oh no, it's all falling apart. They're going to figure me out. I'm such a dork. And I think that that happens with a lot of introverts who have social anxiety. Now, what you're talking about is you're an introvert who loves people, who feels very comfortable, but you're an introvert that has that social battery, which is a very common thing about introverts is
Yep.
you have that social battery and it just drains down over time.
And
So
very
it's not,
quickly.
and
And
very
actually very
quickly,
quickly. Yeah,
and it's
very
not
quickly.
refreshed by being,
Hmm.
which is a common definition of extroverts I do think is correct, is extroverts have that social battery and it's often filled up by being around other people. And with introverts, while they may enjoy being around other people, their batteries kind of just
Uh-huh.
over time
Yep.
just really deplete. And I think that that is not a reason to not go out and socialize, and that's not a reason to not try to be out and growing your career and doing whatever. But I do think what is helpful, and I talk about this in my book, is how do you replenish or refresh that
Hmm.
energy? How do
Hmm.
you protect your energy? How do you have good boundaries around your energy? And I'm sure we're both guilty of this, is not always having boundaries around our energy and our time.
Hmm. And I love the analogy of a social battery because it's
Yeah.
absolutely that, and I'll give you an example that I think you'll
Yes.
appreciate and our listeners will appreciate. So as I kind of started my journey to recover from just feeling, I mean, it was really, I had to lay off my company, my team. I kind of shut down everything. And one of the things I started to think about is, so I live with my husband and my daughter, Mia, who's now 21, was a little younger then. And they're both chitter chatters, like, and they can just, and I was thinking that I tend to get annoyed in the mornings often. And I'm like, why do I get annoyed in the mornings? Like, I just slept. And it is because the three of us would be together in the morning, right? I'm making breakfast and they're chit, 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 chit. And for me, the way my social battery works is morning has to be quiet time. If morning is not quiet time, like I think that's when I build it up. And there was a moment, Goldie, where I realized, and I actually said to them, I said, guys, I can't handle this in the morning. And my
Mhm.
husband was like, okay, fine, I will do breakfast. And we made this change in the family. And I do want to be honest, like with everyone listening, I felt like a lot of guilt saying this because I
Mhm.
think there's a
Mhm.
lot like, oh, I wasn't there for them. Or,
Mhm.
I think protecting our boundaries or speaking up sometimes comes with a lot of anxiety because we're afraid people will
Yes.
judge us or won't like us. But they were so happy, Goldie, because they were like, oh my God, fantastic. Go away. Please go away and be quiet because we're happy to be here. We're very happy when you're not annoyed, when later you
Right.
come out and it's just the small example of just self-awareness. I think of like one thing I learned is
Yes.
I really need quiet mornings. Now, does that happen every single day? No. Like my daughter's now in college. When she's home from college, I want to be there for breakfast. And I'm actually fine with the chit 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 chat. And I find a different way to recharge, right? Sometimes I have to give a keynote in the morning. But I think what you're talking about is so important. So I'd actually love for you. Can you give some, before we dive into the personal branding side,
Right.
there's what I really love in your book, like you actually wrote about like, why is it so important to understand our own kind of aspects of our personality? Because I think sometimes there's this pressure to be a certain way. And we
Yeah.
think if we align with that, that's how we are at our best. But it always backfires.
I love that phrase, when we are at our best, I think that that phrase has now been misused in so many ways because we now associate at your best as when you're the high performer and having run companies. And I grew up in the Bay Area in the tech scene, so I
Yeah.
absolutely know how that phrase has been misused. People take this phrase and use it to mean, okay, this is when you're the highest performer on your team, or you are running 12 startups, or you're the
Yeah.
CEO
Yeah.
of 10 of them. That to me is not necessarily when
Hmm.
you are at your best. So, when you are at your best to me is when you do have a very healthy and sustainable work plus
Hmm.
life. And so many of us focus on just the work aspect for all of us, waving my hand here, workaholics out there, type A folks who are just, who maybe put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do well, and
Hmm.
that doing well is then equated to doing our best. So
Yeah.
I want to first of all say doing your best to me is that healthy balance, which
Hmm.
might to outsiders look like, okay, you're not going at 3000%. Are you doing your best? But you are doing your best because
Hmm.
you're doing something that's sustainable in your
Hmm.
life. I love that example you just gave about your family and taking that time in the morning for yourself. One thing that I think is helpful is simply the most basic thing is understanding if you are a morning, midday, or evening
Yes.
person. So I myself am a night owl. I am so awake at night. My neurons are firing, everything is working at night. So in the morning, I'll do calls in the morning. I'll do, and of course, if we have to do keynotes, I'll do a keynote in the
Yeah.
morning. But I love to do, if I'm writing, if I'm doing art, if I'm
Uh-huh.
creating, I love to do that from the mid afternoon on. And that's just how my brain works.
Mm.
And for other folks, I know I have
I'm
one
the
friend.
opposite. So exactly. I love this. I'm the
Wow.
opposite. Like morning
Yeah.
is my creative time. Do not talk to me. I'm quiet. Like, so I love that example. And I want people listening to like check in with yourself. Like, what are you? Right.
Yeah.
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 Because, and one of the things, sometimes I hear objections from people, you and I are entrepreneurs, right? So I always say, as an entrepreneur, I get to choose the 20 hours a day that I work, right? So there might be more flexibility. I work with a lot of people in corporate who say, well, I don't have a lot of flexibility to
Right.
adjust my day. I find there's always micro adjustments you can make. I mean, I've worked with a
Yes.
CEO who realized he really needed some quiet time in the morning, so he just started getting up a half hour earlier so he would have that quiet time before he had to get on European calls. So I just want to encourage everyone to not dismiss like, oh, I can't make adjustments, right? Because micro things also help.
Absolutely. I think tiny adjustments in your life can be huge changes
Mm-hmm.
in your overall well being and also overall just how you are handling day to day life. So often we think about these changes that are like, how do I change my life for 2026,
Yeah.
2027,
Yeah.
right? We think
Yeah.
about years, or we think about buckets of years, or we think about months at a time, or you're talking about quarters, or you're talking about corporate, you're talking about quarters. So I think it's so helpful to go really granular and think daily. How can you change your life daily? What are small things that we can build in that make our lives more sustainable? So for me, one thing that I do is I go on a walk every single day. Just the simplest thing. I get outside, I get fresh air. I go for a walk with my neighbors, which is also nice because that's a little bit of a social aspect. And for me as an introvert, I do well with one-on-one
Uh-huh.
conversations, right? It's not me and then 20 people going on a walk. It's not a social event. It's a simple interaction. And then I go on a walk, I clear my head, and then I come back and I'm able to do work again or jump on calls or do my creative work. So it's those small things that
Mm-hmm.
I think are so powerful. Do you have any of those small things that you've
Well, I
done in
mean,
your
I'm a
life?
fellow walker in the
Yeah.
morning, 5 mile morning walk, rain or shine, other than like 2 days a year when in Boston in the middle of the winter, it's unbearable. I'm out there and I always say I don't always enjoy it, like if it's super cold or windy, but I
Right.
always enjoy having done it because it's my time, just like you. For me, the other thing that really helps, and this is, I think, helpful for introverts and extroverts, just humans, is just to have, I call it a meeting with myself. So I try to have a meeting with myself every day. And it's actually like sometimes it's just a few minutes and there's no like formal agenda. It's my favorite meeting, right? There's no agenda, right? It's just a time where just to like check in with myself. Sometimes I journal, sometimes I have an idea, sometimes I'm just making art. But it's just, Joseph Campbell used to talk about like your bliss spot, like a place or where you go and you're disconnected from the world. So I think having that is so important. And again, sometimes it's like yesterday, I had a really busy day and I was actually working for my art studio and I was packing up to go home to go and have dinner with my daughter. And I was like, wait, like I'm a little, like my battery, I was, that energy like
Yes.
frazzled and my battery was,
Frenetic, you're all over the
yeah, I was like,
place.
whoa.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm gonna like take 5 minutes. And I took out I do these um, drawings with a paint marker. And so like a 6x6 canvas tile. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna, I put my stuff down. I took one of those out. I turned on some music and I just did a 6x6. I mean, it was 10 minutes maybe.
Mhm.
And like, I was a different person by the end of that. So just,
Yep.
it wasn't a half hour even. It was actually, I think, even less than 10 minutes. So I think I'm so with you, Goldie, on the small adjustments. And just to like wrap this, because now I want to talk about personal branding. I think one of the biggest like things that you talk about in your book and in this conversation, like it's worth getting to know yourself. It's
Yes.
worth like if we can't get to know ourselves and be honest with ourselves, like no one else is going to come and be like, hey, Natalie, you know what? I think you would benefit from quiet mornings. Like that's not going to happen, you know? I think it's our responsibility to get to know ourselves and
Mhm.
what are the things that we need to function at our best. And I love what you said that it doesn't mean at our best does not mean on all cylinders always. It means that we feel full, like we're at our best.
I think that that's so powerful because you're talking about knowing yourself. And then I think even with the clients that you're working with who are very high powered individuals, very respected individuals, it's helpful for them to know themselves so that you can help them better. And I'm sure that you are probably in multiple conversations to also open those doors so they understand
Yeah.
themselves better through your coaching and through your mentoring. And I think not everyone has access or not everyone will have that kind of partner in their career. So hopefully, yes, my book serves as a little bit of that starter guide to be able to start on that journey of getting to know yourself and understanding how you best function and how you best work in the workplace or in your work life.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is like a great segue. So understanding yourself and
Yes.
then how does that translate to your personal brand? So the first thing I want you to talk about, let's take all this mystery out of what a personal brand is,
Yeah.
because I built a personal brand accidentally, right? And it's kind of, I don't think of it as anything other than it's just how I show up. But
Right.
I am sure you've encountered this. There are many people when they hear the word personal brand, it like causes shingles. It's like, oh, I don't know what my personal brand is.
Right.
I work with some incredible leaders and they will often come like out of breath, be like, I got feedback. I need a stronger personal brand at work. I don't know. What is that? What is that? So can you first just start us off with like, what is a personal brand? And
Mhm.
do we all have one? Do we create one? What's this mysterious, wonderful thing?
So I'll start with personal brand versus reputation, which is the number one question that I get. So, what is a personal brand? So, the personal brand is the story that you have control over, it's the story that you tell. Now, reputation is the story that others tell when you're not in the room. So, I think that that's a helpful way, hopefully, of thinking about personal brand versus reputation. So, personal brand is something that you do have. And so many of us, I would say, before the advent of the internet, not everyone always had a personal brand. But now that we are in this internet age, which is funny to say because we're in 2025 and
Yeah.
we've been in the internet age for a long, long
Yeah.
time at this point. But it with the internet, it's so helpful to think almost everyone out there who has social media, especially that's tied to their name or to their
Hmm.
businesses, you have a personal brand. I have a couple of friends who, because of the way the internet is so prevalent, they've just opted out of the internet game. If they do have social media, it's very anonymous. It's only, I think one of my friends has one that's only about their cat, but it's not branded. It's not meant to get cat sponsors. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
just pictures of their cat that they share. And I think that there is now an overwhelmed situation that is
Mm.
happening, which I talk a little bit about in my book about, with being on the internet too much with all of these people. Once again, you said all the C-level executives, and I've worked with some C-level executives myself to help them build out their personal brand, or rather, I think I've worked with their teams to build out their personal brand, which is a more accurate way of saying
Yeah.
that. But I think that so many people from the very top of the food chain to the very, and I don't want to say bottom, but the starting level of that
Yeah.
food chain in corporate America, everyone at this point has and probably needs a personal brand. And there are, of course, exceptions to the rules. For example, if you're not aided by being online to have a personal brand to get your next job. One of my friends, she is wonderful, and she is a medical doctor, and all
Mm.
of her jobs are through referrals. So she does
Yeah.
a very specialized skill set, and 100% of her jobs are through word of mouth. So people
My
will,
ear just perked up, Goldie, because my
yeah,
daughter, Mia, who's studying for her MCAT, the medical school entrance exam in that room over there, is on path to become a doctor. So I'm listening with both ears. But
yeah, and
yeah.
there's so many, I think there are so many careers out there that we don't think about that don't require the internet to
Hmm.
be successful, but they're becoming fewer and fewer
Yes,
over
I agree.
time,
I agree.
right?
All right. So, I'm because I'm, I'm so excited to like get into a little bit the meat of it.
Let's do it.
Um, So how, like, if someone is not you or me who have been
Right.
kind of public figures and we're sort of built our brand, how does one begin to even think about it? And the other thing I'd love for you to reflect on is, we've talked about the internet, but I think personal branding is also important within a company, right?
Yes.
My husband, Avi, has been in big companies. He's at Amazon currently. He's been in big companies, and he definitely has a personal brand that he is known by. And I think he is less active online, somewhat on LinkedIn, but within a company, it's also important. So I'd love for you to talk us through, like, how do we begin to create it, whether it's online or within our organization?
So I think what you're talking about, I like to segment things into online and offline. And
Hmm.
I love that you brought off offline, because everyone wants to know, how can I build the biggest brand online?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
people forget that we're still humans at the end of the day. We relate to other humans, and the best and most memorable brands we can have is the way we interact with other people in person, right? Because the hope is that if you build this beautiful brand online, that you will show up and be that same person in person. So
Exactly.
which I'm sure, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but every once in a while when I go speak and I'm speaking at a conference, I'll meet someone and they're so drastically different than their online persona. And I get that for some people, it's a very protective thing.
Hmm.
I'm not judging why people do it, but it's just interesting to see when people are so drastically different. So I
Yes.
went a little side tangent,
No,
but
no,
let's
it's
get,
all good.
let's,
It's all good. It's all really relevant because you're acknowledging something I had. I'm not going to name the person. It's a celebrity, very, very famous person
Mhm.
that has a very particular brand that I had an opportunity not just to meet, but spend a day with. And
Mhm.
I was really disillusioned and off center because it was like a different human being showed up and I had all these hopes and dreams. So it's just kind of validating that experience. So I think it's an important point to the authenticity of our brands. But okay,
Right.
going back to like, how do we start to even
But
craft
how do
it,
we
whether it's
start?
online or in person?
Right. So, how do we start with our brands? I think that the easiest way to start is to think, who do I want to speak to? And if you've ever worked in marketing, I worked in digital marketing for over a decade. So I'm used to marketing personas. I'm used to building out profiles. I'm used to doing all this stuff. I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start with what I consider the easiest way to start thinking about who you want to speak to in your personal brand, because a personal brand should be at its best a conversation. It
Mm.
shouldn't be shouting on the bullhorn that this is who you are. So, who do we want to be in conversation with? Hopefully, that's a helpful first step to think about.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give 3 tiers of people you can be in conversation with. So
Okay.
we'll make it very simple,
Love
right?
it.
So, one tier, let's start at the very top. These might be your potential clients. These might be your potential next bosses. These might be your boss's bosses at the current place
Uh-huh.
that you're at. The next tier down, then, these are your peers. These are your colleagues. These are people who do, say, your same role, but in a different industry vertical, or they're in your industry vertical, but they do a slightly different job. So they're your peers, they're at your level. And then one level down is people that you want to be your audience. So it's the wonderful folks that are listening to this podcast. It's the people who read a Substack. It's your it's my 100,000 followers on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
that is the audience that you might want to
Hmm.
reach. That's more of, not, I would say, the general public, but a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to think, first of all, which of these 3 buckets would you like to speak to first? Because the way you speak to your peers about, say, what you are so knowledgeable
Hmm.
in, say Natalie wanted to start a brand new Substack on public speaking, in which she's absolutely an expert in, she would think, okay, do I want this to be for example, would I want this to be for clients who might hire me? Or
Hmm.
would I want this to be for my peers who are other speakers? Or do I want this to be for the general public of people who are just want to know more about how to be more confident speaking in general, right?
Uh-huh. That's a
From the
super
place,
helpful distinction,
right,
Goldie. I
as
love the
from the place
tiers.
of being somebody who is a great public speaker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's super I love just the clarity of that because again, I think anyone can apply it, whether, you're thinking, I just had a conversation with someone who is looking for their kind of next step in leadership, right? They don't necessarily want to change careers, but they just feel kind of they hit a ceiling. And without using words of personal branding, I think this is what we were talking about, right? So that person would really need to think about, how do I speak to my boss, my boss's boss, the leadership at the company, et cetera. And so I think I think it's useful for anyone at any, whatever it is we're doing, online, offline. I love that, the trilogy.
Right. And I think even with, we talked a little bit about your beautiful art and your stunning art. And I think that there's a different way you'd speak to the audience if you were speaking to, say, a museum curator,
Mhm.
or a small, why am I forgetting this word? A small
Gallery.
gallery. Oh my gosh, thank you for giving
Yeah.
that. A small gallery owner, versus speaking to other painters, other artists, and then versus speaking to the general public who might want to buy prints of your art or might
Uh-huh.
want to
Uh-huh.
buy the actual art prints themselves. So these are, once again, 3 different categories, 3 different ways to think about it. And I believe it is the easiest way to start because we don't get lost in the weeds. I've sat down with teams before and sat down with very powerful individuals who want to build their personal brand, and they immediately think, okay, I want to approach the demographic from 21 to 22 and I want to do this, but they need to be in these 3 American cities, but maybe also these. And I think you get caught in the weeds and
Mm.
you lose sight of the forest when you do that kind of thinking, because you need to start with these bigger buckets first.
No, I love that. It makes it so clear and like you have to make a choice. So my next question
Yeah,
is, um, it's a question on kind of the next step of telling the story, right? Because you said brand is your story, but
right.
also, I want to throw in like a side question as that one goes in, of a lot of people have a difficult relationship with self promotion.
Yes.
And I don't say this as someone who's neutral to this. I have had to work very hard and still do to when I talk about my work or my art or my programs or whatever it is, to really coach myself that this isn't me beating my chest of how great I am. This is the things I do may be helpful to someone else. But a lot of people, there's this thing goes around like shameless self-promotion, which has always been kind of funny. Why should it be shameful? So can
Right.
you talk about like the next piece of how do we begin to craft our story, and how do we get over this resistance of like, isn't
Mhm.
this just kind of me like going, I am like me, look at me, I am so cool, look at like, because that's, I find that people start to really hit a block there.
Right. So I think with especially personal branding, it feels often like once again that you're not in conversation, that you're shouting into the void, that
Mm,
you're holding a bullhorn and you're saying, this is me, this is how I exist. I'm doing great, everyone. Hire me for XYZ or like work with me for XYZ. And this is why we so typically associate extroverts with being great at this. But I will say, I know extroverts who are shouting into the void and they don't get work. Um, throwing that out there.
yeah.
So hopefully some introverts feel a little bit better about that. But I definitely want to say it is so helpful to think about help. So, one word I want to pull out that you mentioned yourself, and it is something that I tell clients and I tell people in general when they're thinking about building their personal brand is how are you helping others? How
Mm,
is the information? How is your knowledge? Because you have gained this knowledge through your hard work, through your lived experiences. How is this knowledge
mm,
helping others? And I think that is the first way to begin to understand why self promotion isn't a shameful thing, isn't a harmful thing. I think it's what are you giving in service to others, right? How are
exactly.
you being helpful? What is it that you know that will help someone else? And when you frame it like that, especially in your own head, I'm not even getting into how you're framing it when you promote yourself online, but just in your own head, how can you be helpful and in service to others?
And I think to me, Goldie, like that is the frame. I think,
Yes.
maybe that is the frame, not just to get over the resistance, but that's what I try to do before I write, an email, my weekly email, or share something on social. Like, that's the question I ask myself. Like, do I think this is this something I really want to say? For me, it's like that begins, right? Is this true to me? And is this helpful to someone else? Right. Even when
Right.
I'm sharing my life or my bright outfits or my art, whatever it is, it's funny, actually, a great example of this because I wanted your take. So I wear a lot of bright colors. I also wear a lot of black, but I wear a lot of bright colors. I always wear
Right.
yellow on stage. I paint in bright color. I love color. And I posted this story on Instagram yesterday. I was wearing hot pink pants.
Mhm.
And I just took a photo. Like sometimes I take photos of my bright outfits. And I heard from a bunch of people who were like, wow, you're so confident. You can wear bright colors. Like,
Yeah.
and then I got into conversation with some of them of like, well, if you like bright colors, maybe you can wear them too. I don't think like it is part of my brand. I wear bright colors, but I don't stand there and say, I am wearing bright colors.
Right.
I will say something like, oh, it's Pink Pants Monday, and I'm sharing it why? Because I know it inspires a lot of people to embrace
Yes.
their love of bold colors that they otherwise don't. I've heard enough now. So can you talk about just I'd love for you to give some like just tactical tips for our listeners who want to like start talking more to that audience they choose. Like, what are some suggestions that you have for someone both maybe online, but also in an organization? Like, how can they actually start telling those stories without being like, hi, I am Natalie. This is my story.
I so believe in show, not tell in
Uh
so
huh.
many ways. So I think both you and I are lovers of color. I love the color green, which might be obvious by my color of hair. And I didn't even think when I honestly put on the shirt today, but yes, I love, love, love the color green. And I love that you wear these colors. And something that I've been asked, I remember I was giving a big corporate talk and afterwards, these very high powered women came up and said, I would love to have purple hair, right? I would love to have colored hair, but I feel very uncomfortable with expressing myself that way in this more conservative company. And I'll say two words that we so often forget that I think are underused, and that is common sense.
Mm,
I think that I've heard the phrase before, and I don't know who to attribute this to, but common sense isn't common. And I think that that is absolutely true
mm,
to this day, is that we have so many times when we ask others for permission, we ask others when we should be asking others for forgiveness, and the and the vice versa is true. But when we're thinking about building our personal brand, how do we get out there? How do we take that first initial step? First of all, use common sense as your boundaries. If you think that something would be absolutely inappropriate in your workplace, maybe don't do that. But I think that there's a leap of faith and a little bit of, I'm going to use this word, bravery that you
yes.
can have in the workplace. I think bravery and not bravado in the workplace is so,
Mm,
so
I love that.
helpful. Being a bit brave and sharing who you are on the inside, whether that's wearing bright colors or having the colored hair or sharing more of your distinct expertise at work or online, I think all of those things are good and they're a sign of bravery. Now, bravado on the other side is when you just shout, I'm the best, without
Mm,
having a backup to that, without having the expertise that underlies why you are. And I think whenever someone says they are the best, that always is a little bit of a red flag to me.
uh-huh.
But when someone says that they are an expert in a hyper specific thing that they have, say, years of experience in, that is a green flag.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And again, you're making me think, Avi, my husband, is kind of my litmus test because he's in big companies. And I
Yeah.
spent some time in a few big companies, and it's just not the world I've lived in for the last 20 years. But I think you'll love this example, and I just want to share it with everyone. So Avi is a executive. He leads big teams, right? Sales
Yeah.
engineering. Avi is a movie lover. Avi is an app and a total movie buff. For my birthday a couple of years ago, he made a list and he keeps it up that together we watched something like 780 movies, and
Oh,
his
wow.
own list is like 2,000.
Wow.
And for years, I was like, you got to just do something with this. So finally, he started writing a movie blog, but he kind of kept it, on Instagram and stuff. And then he started putting it in his, like, at Amazon, I guess they have a public directory. So he would just put a link to it next to his name. And he was like, oh my God, it just changed all my interactions because people will come on a call with him that don't
Right.
know him and they'd be like, wait, I was looking at your movie blog and you like this movie and I also like this movie, but actually I disagree with your review of this. You're talking about brand as storytelling and being in conversation. All of a sudden, his brand has shifted because he's now Avi, not just the leader, but also the movie guy.
Right.
It creates all these interesting conversations and ties for him that allow him to be a human being with other people, not
Yes.
just executive. And I just think it's a great example of what you wouldn't think as a personal brand, but
Yes.
it is.
I love this. And I love this particularly because I'm about to give a brown paper bag lunch talk. And it is actually on this subject. So I love that you brought this up. And I will give you the title of this mini talk I'm giving, which is Tiny Stories, Big Branding. And it
Mm,
is all the tiny stories that make us really interesting, that set us apart and make us unique, because so many of us don't know how to open the conversation, or small talk is the absolute worst. And I think so many introverts will agree with me. Small talk is the absolute worst at
yeah,
times.
yeah,
And
yeah.
a lot of extroverts will agree too. Not
Uh-huh.
every extrovert likes small talk either. Um, so, to help with that, I think it's always helpful to have small stories on your side, right? And one of those small stories is the way your husband has these curated movies. That is a beautiful example of a small story. I would say even for you in a corporate environment, being an artist, being a
Yeah.
wonderful artist is, and of course I don't want to minimize that by saying it's a small story, but in the corporate environment, that is your small story. But what's funny is, as an artist in your artist environment, working with corporate leaders is your small story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, and once again, not minimizing what you do on
No,
either
no,
side.
it's the thing that is I love that and I love small stories, big branding, because
Yeah.
what you're talking about to me is bringing all different parts of ourselves into different contexts, right? Like we were just working on my new speaker reel that we've just released, and in the middle of it, I'm giving a keynote. And then in the middle of the keynote, there's this whole moment where I'm on stage in front of 500 people and saying, I am an artist. And they erupt in tears and clapping. And I'm showing my art behind me because my whole story is about reinvention, right? My talk is
Yes.
about reinventing ourselves. I could have given lots of examples. I could have given an example of reinventing from a technology executive to a speaker, an author, but I wanted to bring something unexpected and something that is very true to me. So that's what I think you're talking about, is bringing parts of ourselves. Like if in the work context, Avi talks about movies, like that's a small story, but
It
Avi is
opens
the
the
movie guy.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what helps is that it may not be directly related to your work. In fact, it's almost better if it is not directly related to your work,
Yeah.
and it opens the door to make you more relatable, more reliable, more once again, more human. I think we were just speaking earlier in the green room about everything is in the age of AI, and I myself am guilty. I have a talk humanizing your brand in the age of AI. So everyone has an age of AI talk probably at this point.
Yeah.
But I want to say that we are still humans at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Once again, I want to send that point home. And it's so helpful when we think about that, when we relate to each other. And humans are multifaceted. So having those small stories, having those interests that are outside of directly your work, that are interesting, that others can connect with you with, that is going to be so helpful. I sometimes play tabletop RPG games like Dungeons and
Cool.
Dragons and things like that. And I remember I used to write for Forbes as well, and I wrote a couple of articles on D&D prior to it blowing up in the way that it's been doing. And I remember I was on a call with a CEO, a very important CEO, of course, and he just said, "Oh, I play D&D with my friends." And I was like, "Where did that come from?" And he said, "Oh, I read your Forbes article on D&D, and I just wanted to say, I play with my brother." And it was this very sweet, very human moment that we
Mm.
shared between the two of us.
Mm. And I think what you're talking about, and it's such a great way to, I think, wrap the conversation is, what you said, like personal brand is not a big poster. That's my analogy. I keep
Yeah.
thinking of it. It's not a big poster that you hold up in front of yourself that is like, this is who I am. It is how you are. It is the stories you share. It is the different aspects of you that you
Mhm.
talk about. And I love just the different ways you've talked about it, that like what's the purpose of a personal brand is to connect better. Isn't
Right.
that kind of the purpose?
I think it's definitely how to connect better. And then who is the person behind the personal brand? And yes,
Uh-huh.
how do we connect better? How are we better in conversation with each other? How are we talking in a way that connects us?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
really beautiful. And I always like to give homework to our listeners just because, I don't know, it's my Russian school training. I can't help myself. So I'm going to take a note from what Goldie has shared, and your homework, everyone, is to tell one small story about yourself in the next few days. By the end of the week, that's your homework. Tell one small story to someone, a colleague, coworker, even a friend. Maybe it's a work story, but tell one small story about yourself that, especially if it's been a story, I'm sure Goldie, you hear this a lot, like, oh, what does this have to do with my work? It's not
Right.
professional. But that's what you're talking about. Like bringing those human elements is what makes us unique and unforgettable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Goldie, your book comes out. Tell us again, end of October, right?
October 28th,
October
2025.
28th. It's called Personal Branding for Introverts. We're going to, of course, put a link in the show notes. I encourage everyone to pre order it. I won't lie, I'm not 100% through. I'm about 60% through. I'm underlining, I'm reading it online, lots of highlights. And I'm someone who I think understand personal branding. I'm learning a ton. So everyone grab a copy of the book, whether you have a personal brand or not. It'll give you really fresh insights. And Goldie, I just want to tell you a huge thank you, not just for your insights. I've learned a ton. I know our listeners have, but just for the very authentic humanness with which you deliver them, which makes them something like that is so tangible and real. I'm so grateful we got to have this conversation.
I'm so grateful for being here and speaking with you and also hearing your stories. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share those. And to everyone, as I like to say, that's all we have today. And I will be in your ear and on your screen if you're watching on YouTube next week. If you've loved this episode, please rate it, please comment. It helps other people discover it. If there's someone in your life you think would benefit, send them a link so they can begin to acknowledge their personality and honor who they are and build their personal brand through stories. Thanks, everyone.